You're tuned into The Collective Voice, thought-provoking interviews co-hosted by young adults, fostering deep faith through courageous questions. Welcome to the conversation. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to this episode of The Collective Voice. I'm Reverend Phil Dickey. Once again, glad to be with you and here also with Cece Suknak-Sonnier. Look at me. I'm finally getting it right, Cece. Here we are,
Yes.
6 months in, and I'm finally getting
Gold star.
Gold star for me. We got to start handing out gold stars.
That's what my spiritual director tells me. She's like, wow, so much growth. Give yourself a good star. Like, actually go buy some and then give them to you.
I really like this idea. We should. What if we did Collective Voice gold stars?
Let's do it.
Okay.
And that might be perfect because our guest today, Addy Kruse from the Gather Network, she is one of the co-leaders of Gather Cincinnati, the second oldest Gather site? Second oldest? 5 years,
wow.
Yes, which we want to hear about. But she is a teacher, so I don't know. Are you of the age where you hand out gold stars, like with your students?
I've never tried, but I believe it or not, high schoolers love a sticker.
Oh, okay.
So if I can get my hands on some stickers, I might do it.
All right, Phil. It's up to you now.
Collective Voice gold stars. They'll be like, what is the Collective Voice? You'll be like, well, I'm kind of famous, actually. I was on this podcast this summer.
Yes.
Podcast famous.
Addy, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? About, like, what do you want the people to know who are listening about who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you mentioned, I am a teacher, and it is truly a vocation. I love teaching so much. I'm specifically a high school science teacher for English language learners. So those are not always immigrants, but students who speak another language at home and need some extra support accessing the content in English. So it is just such a blessing to be able to teach them every day, and I absolutely love doing that. And then when I'm not doing that, I am the co-leader of Gather Cincinnati. Like you said, the second oldest Gather network, mostly Lutheran, kind of ecumenical, kind of all over the place. And I've been leading that since Advent of 2021. Because Elizabeth and I got dinner, and we totally meant to go to Holden evening prayer at our friend's church. And then we just kept talking and went, didn't that start at 6? Oh no.
Shout out to Elizabeth Gilbert. We've had her on the podcast before. She is the founder of Gather Cincinnati and
Yes.
one of the first ever Gather Network co-chairs. She's been on our podcast before. I don't know if we can link that. That's above my pay grade.
I'm on it.
But we are big fans of Elizabeth Gilbert. And so how did you connect with her? What was it like to begin? What, I guess, intrigued you about Gather Cincinnati in the end of 2021?
So I love the model that we have, and it worked for me and it's worked for a lot of other people. Right at the beginning of Gather, Elizabeth and the other organizers that have since aged out and had kids and started calls, and God bless them all, they reached out to the Synod Conference pastors, so the Cincinnati Conference, Cincinnati and many cornfield churches around Cincinnati, saying, hey, if you have a young adult in your congregation, please invite them to this new thing we're starting. And I was one of 2 young adults in my congregation, basically, and which is exactly who they were targeting. They were targeting people who were worshiping but didn't really have anybody else in their age group. So my pastor sent me this email, like, hey, I think you'd be really interested in this. And that's how I ended up at the first Gather worship. And then I just attended every single event after that. And Elizabeth's like, you're really invested in this. Do you want to help me? And that's how I ended up in leadership.
You show up, you get a job, you got to be careful, right?
I mean, that is truly the church experience. Also at that church, I sat behind the wrong person on my very first Sunday. She heard me sing and like, you're going to help me with the children's choir. And I'm like, sure, I'll help you with the children's choir.
Voluntold, which I'm sure perhaps maybe you're used to as a, did we hear before we started, double pastor's kid?
Yep. I maybe I'll shed the brighter side on it. people recognize my God-given gifts and invite me to use them.
That's a good way to spin that.
And yet we also know, at least a couple weeks ago, my husband and I were visiting a friend's church, and we were sitting close to where the musicians were, and my husband has a beautiful voice, and almost every time we worship together, someone comes up to him and says, "You have such a beautiful voice. I loved sitting near you and hearing you sing." And someone did for sure do that, but then also was like, "You need to join our choir." And he was like, "We're actually members of another church. We bop around in this season of life where I'm not bound to one congregation. But we have transferred our membership and have that as a space. That is our church. So if he's going to sing in a choir, it probably should be at the church that we're members of." And she's like, no, just sing in our choir and join our bells and do that. And we were just like, okay. So
recruitment. That's solid recruitment.
I love your spin on it of they see your gifts, they invite you to use them. And yeah, have you had the experience where you're like, can you not?
Yeah, every once in a while it does feel like a lot of pressure. The hard and fast line I do, I will not join church council. That is my one rule.
Oh,
you can ask me to do everything else. I was the youth representative on the church council where my dad was the pastor, and that was a soul-sucking experience. Part of it is it's a very small church, and you get to look at those numbers and go, wow, this institution that I rely on is failing miserably. And as a 15-year-old, I could not handle that reality. The church is still surviving. With a lot of good and external support, but that was just it sucks the soul out of church for me, and I will not be doing it again.
Good for you, though. I love that you've been I'll serve and I'll have gifts for all these different things, but this is one space that I will not. I would love to know, you said you were at a church with 2 young adults. What led you or kept you maybe involved in that specific congregation where there were just 2 young adults?
So when I first moved to Cincinnati, I did sit down with my dad because he knows every pastor in the synod. And we looked at all the different churches, and we picked the church I attend right now because my dad thought I'd like the pastor. And I do. She's wonderful. I love her a lot. And also, I'm now, with retrospect, realizing that he had some funny ideas about the church downtown, because the church downtown used to be really dangerous. It used to be, the park across the street was super crime-ridden. I remember my mom Sunday supplied there once when I was a kid, and she's like, "Pray for me, somebody got shot in the park across the street from the church that I'm preaching at today." That is no longer the case. Gentrification came for that neighborhood, and now that is a very quirky, thriving church, which was also the closest church to where I first lived in Cincinnati. So I think that also had some influence on my dad's advice. And yeah, I was really taken in. I didn't have young adults, but I had plenty of friends. And as a lot of people experience in a church, honorary grandparents, honorary aunts and uncles, the choir really adopted me, and I would go to brunch with the choir after every service, and the populations of that church have ebbed and flowed for sure, but I have always felt like a valuable member of that church, even if my specific age bracket and experience isn't very well represented.
Will you say a little bit more just about the intergenerational connections that you're getting there? And you said, honorary grandparents and things like that, but where are you from originally? Because you're moving to Cincinnati from somewhere else?
Yeah, so I originally lived outside of Springfield, Ohio, not to be confused with the other 36 Springfields.
I'm from right outside Springfield, Missouri, so I feel you.
There you go, mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's only an hour-ish north of here. And then I went to college in Athens, Ohio, at Ohio University. Okay. So this was my first move straight out of college.
And so then I love that. So you found a space there and like have made intergenerational connections. And like, will you just share a little bit about, with the audience, like what that's been like for you and like how that's helped with having honorary grandparents and honorary parents and honorary fill in the blank?
Yeah, it helps a lot, especially because I did just kind of move here with my partner and didn't know anyone else, those big college connections, but we didn't have so many friends in town. And, a lot of my experience has been super serendipitous. I think the best example is one time, community breakfast, I was just complaining about my terrible apartment. My first apartment was like kind of close to campus, so it's that level of quality, and I was just complaining about it, as one does. And she goes, "Oh, well, my parents rent a house down the street. I wonder if they'd get it ready to rent to you when your lease ends." And that spirals into a super deep and loving relationship with this family. I mentored the granddaughter through her confirmation. I'm renting from her grandparents. And, we invite them over for dinner. They're our next door neighbors. Our dogs are best friends. If we ask someone else to watch our dog, they get offended. They're like, "Wait, no. Ori's our dog too." So especially as somebody who never really had a huge grandparent presence growing up, because I was born so late in my parents' lives that I kind of lost my grandparents very young. They are kind of like my adulthood grandparents. And yeah, just, you never know. You say the one thing and then suddenly everything spirals into, "Oh, but I have this connection and I have this connection and I can do this for you." And it's just been, that's what community is about.
That's really sweet.
And it is what community is about. And I think it's this reciprocal movement, I would say, of God's abundance, right? Like, why do we hoard when we could connect? Why do we keep it for ourselves when we could offer it to somebody else, and then see the ways that flows ever more outward? Addy, when we were originally like touching base about this podcast, I think this thing that I'm going to bring up relates to what you had just said. We have a little interest form to see, about what people might be interested in talking about. And one thing you said was the new church is really just reclaiming the old church in that podcast form. I want to hear a little bit more about that. And then 2, do you see anything, whether it's the experience you've had before being in Cincinnati, the experience you've had with Gather Cincinnati, or your intergenerational space at the church that you attend, how are those places, or how are you seeing the new church, whatever that means to you, reclaiming the old church? I'm really curious about
Absolutely. That. I knew you guys would touch on it.
I see your giddiness already too. Like a light has just lit up. Let's go.
Well, I'm sure you guys get these questions too. I get all the times, like, how do we attract young adults? How do we save the church, basically, is what I get asked all the time. And I know a lot of the wrong answers. I don't know all of the right ones, but like the young adults that I know, they are not interested in a drum set rock band at the altar. They're not interested in what's that one video with the snare drummers coming in from the ceiling for the Christmas? I'll send it to you guys. It's insane.
That's here in North Texas, actually, where I'm in Dallas, and it's a church not too far north of me. Yeah,
it's where Phil worships, is what he's not saying.
It is not where I worship. I can very much assure you.
Yeah, like, they're not looking for, like, perfectly crafted marketing emails and, a color scheme or whatever. They are looking for a little bit of nostalgia. They are looking for what they are used to, what they're familiar, what brings them comfort and peace. And they are looking for genuine human connection and genuine like community support, which, now that I'm looking for it, I see it everywhere in the Bible, of like how the disciples were like almost communist. It's give me all your money and we are going to support each other. We do not earn for ourselves, we earn for the group, and if you need something, we will give it to you. And whatever you earn, you will share with us. And but in a less corrupt human way and in a much more godly way. And that's what the early church was too. A lot of the early churches, they just gathered in each other's homes and they supported those who needed support and comforted those who needed comfort. And that I see all the time is what young adults are looking for, is a place to be helped, a place to help others, regardless of the trivial kinds of improvements that people think we're looking for in a church.
I'm curious how that plays out both on Sunday mornings, like you talked about the drums and all that kind of stuff. What does that look like beyond Sunday mornings, do you think?
I think that people are longing for a space in which they can have tough conversations. And especially with Gather, I see it all the time. It is, I've set up this Bible study, book club, whatever, and we do not get started for 45 minutes because it is just us talking about like the things we need to process together, completely separate from what we plan to talk about that day. And even, if we're planning a social event, those deep conversations happen all throughout that social event, sometimes over duck pin bowling. So people want genuine conversations in a place that they feel safe to talk about them.
I think so too. And I have a very similar experience here in Gather Austin, where since our beginning in fall of 22, December of 22, really, we've started with check-ins, highs and lows, and usually a topical question. And there are some times where I get a little tired because it takes 45 minutes to an hour, depending on how many people are there. And I do think it's a little bit overwhelming for a new person to come in who has never met these people. And because there's already a base level of trust in the community, some people can go deep, but a new person is probably not going to be willing to share that much until they get to know people. But it's this yearning to be seen, to be known, maybe to be challenged, to be grown or formed. So what are some of the other, you've talked about Bible study or a book study, you've talked about socials with Gather Cincinnati. What are some other ways that you think or you see or y'all are working and acting on reclaiming the old church in this new expression? Because, and we've talked a lot about Gather over the course of the podcast this season or year, since we've had, a number of folks that I'm friends with and connected to that are also Gather leaders or former Gather leaders. And it is a newer expression within the ELCA of doing something different. It's not congregation-based. It is region or city-based. So hopefully I didn't lose my question in my long introduction to it. But yeah, what are the ways that y'all at Gather Cincinnati are reclaiming that old church, or what are your hopes of further reclaiming it?
One thing that we do that I really love is when we do our quarterly worships, we always have a discussion after the message. So it is not okay, we're going to sit quietly and we're going to just be in the Word, and then we're going to pretend to listen, and then we're going to pretend to listen to the sermon. It is, it's always somebody in the group giving the message. And we have a mix of lay and clergy in the group. So like in July, it will be a clergy person giving the message, but a lot of time it's a lay person. And we too truly believe in the priesthood of all believers. And even if it is somebody who's not super eloquent, or it is somebody who can share a good story and something that people connect to. And then we immediately follow that up with 10 to 15 minutes of small group discussion based on the message and some guided questions. And we're always pretty clear, just like, these are just guided questions. You do this. This is not for a grade. Just talk about what you feel like you need to talk about in this general topic. And I think that has really helped and reminds me a lot of, kind of the early church wrestling with the scripture, wrestling with difficult concepts together. in a way that we don't have like just the one person who is our theologian or the one theology. Even we are a mix of a lot of different people. We tend to skew more lifelong Lutheran than more than anything else, but we've got a ton of ex-evangelicals. We've got a ton of like loosely affiliated Catholics. We still like the Catholic Mass, but don't quite like the Catholic Church. We've got a little bit of everything, so we don't really have a dogma necessarily. We're all just kind of talking from our own experiences and our own beliefs.
That makes me think of, we've talked a couple different times on the podcast about this idea of belonging yourself into belief versus believing yourself into belonging. And I would love to just know what are ways that you create space for, I mean, I hear, like, there's a message given and then there's like general conversations here, but are there times that it gets dicey, right? Because of people's different backgrounds or different dogmas or beliefs that get brought in, and whenever there is like differing views and or potentially even conflict, what are ways that y'all have handled that or managed that?
I think we start from a good center of, we are very clearly inclusive, we are very clearly affirming. And so having those standards all in common of like, these are things we are not apologetic about this. These are like our non-negotiables, as it were. Starting from that point, there is really nothing that you could say that, as long as you are following those standards, there's nothing you could say that would be so offensive that somebody wouldn't feel comfortable. And so it is just getting into that minutia of like, is God all-controlling, all-omnipotent? Like, what do we think about free will? Is my path completely ordained, or have my choices changed? Like, having those discussions where we do not agree, but also, does it matter that we agree? And I think that's also very freeing, and is something that I find a lot of us have in common, is that like, we want answers to these questions, but also the answer doesn't matter. I'm going to live my life the same way. And I'm going to try my best to be a good person despite the answer to this question.
I wonder, Addy, then maybe what is your biggest question right now in your life of faith? And then I'd want to know maybe what is a recurring question you hear from others in your Gather group? And I'm maybe they're the same, but likely they're different.
I know mine is definitely different. My struggle or doubt or whatever word you want to call it is, I struggle with the power of prayer, in that I don't think it exists. If in my head God is omnipotent and knows everything and has a plan and all of those things, then what do my prayers matter except to me? And so I think that prayer in a meditative practice and a myself connecting to God way makes sense in like the context of my faith, but like, I don't in my heart believe that if I'm praying for somebody to be cured of cancer, that my prayer matters. So that's my personal lion to wrestle. I don't think there's like one specific one that I hear over and over again in discussions with Gather. I think a lot of the classics do pop up, why do bad things happen? We have had discussions about the like free will versus God's plan, that kind of thing. But yeah, no one thing really sticks out as like, this is the thing that everybody's wrestling with, which I think is a good thing. I mean, I think that it means we can all support each other in our doubts and like provide different perspectives. I think if we all were struggling with the same thing, that might be a red flag.
Can I ask you a question about the all-powerful aspect of God?
Sure.
Can I dive in a little deeper on this? We don't do this a lot on this podcast. We don't just dive in on theological questions. So I love this. This is getting me all excited. Thomas Oord, who is an open and relational theologian, has a book. I think it's a book called The Death of Omnipotence and the Birth of Amipotence, Amipotence, which he basically says instead of God being all powerful, God is all loving. Like that's the concept that he goes about it, and says that it's not about God having power and or control, but really being all loving and ultimately answering to love as opposed to power. And so I wonder if, and just play with me here for a minute, right? If you were to entertain an idea of a God who is all loving as opposed to all powerful, and maybe they're one and the same, maybe they're not. I don't know that they can always line up together, but just with this idea, and obviously I'm guessing here, I shouldn't say obviously, that you probably haven't read Oord's argument here, but if God's all loving, how might that change your understanding of that idea of prayer? That's a hard question. I put you on the spot.
It is a hard question. I mean, it's definitely like something I believe, like, that is not contrary to like my experience of God. I don't know how it changes my idea of prayer. Honestly, if anything, it makes it a little harder of like, if God's all loving, then I'm going to pray for something and then it doesn't happen. And then like, okay, but where's God's love?
I think I'm channeling Oord here, but like he has a book called God Can't. And the idea behind God not being all powerful is that God can't do some of those things. Like God doesn't have the quote power to just suddenly change things in the known world, like curing of cancer or something like that, because God is still bound by the laws of physics in a way that I'm butchering his argument. It's been a minute since I read that book. It's a really good book, but basically like God responds in and out of love as opposed to out of power and control. So his argument is that God can't, because God is bound by the rules essentially that God has set up within the created order, which then gets into all these questions about like miracles and all these other kind of things too, right? Which is a whole other conversation probably too. Anyway, it's just a little thought experiment. I just wanted to throw it out there and play with. And I would recommend Tom Oord. I'll put it in the show notes too, because I think that Oord's books have challenged me and it's making me want to go back and reread some of these things, because I'm like, ooh, I need to freshen up on Oord in open and relational theology. But yeah, more than anything, thanks for letting me just kind of lob one at you there and entertain that question.
I needed a book club book for fall, so I think I just found it.
Well, and I will say, like the last church I worked at, we read his book, God Can't, together, and then I just reached out to him and like was, hey, would you ever be interested in joining our small group to just discuss your book? And he was like, I absolutely would love to do that. So he's a very accessible human being. And if you're interested in, I don't know if he was at Wild Goose last year. I don't know if he's going to Wild Goose this year, but if he was interested in going to Wild Goose, he's usually hanging out at Wild Goose too.
Oh, lovely.
I love that. And I think, I don't know, prayer is such a weird thing. And I also am a firm believer that like God does not have a plan for me. And like I experienced a little bit too much turbulence in my childhood and in my teenage years, with some family members making hard decisions and having hard things happen to them. And people would come up to me at church and say, Cece, don't you worry, this is all part of God's plan. And I would say it just didn't conflate to me that a God who is all loving, a God who is all powerful would want me to experience such turmoil. And on the other side of that, having gone through it and having, experienced a lot of deep reflection through spiritual direction and counseling, shout out to both my former therapists and my current spiritual director. I still don't think that like suffering is a part of God's plan. Mm-hmm. And yet, I mean, I'm Lutheran, so I do believe in the theology of the cross, that God does come to us in moments of suffering. And God has a heart for the oppressed, right? We think of liberation theology. But it's hard to spend years praying for something and never seeing anything really change, except for maybe the change that impacts me in my own life, of thinking in my own heart of like, well, maybe one of these years I can actually give this over to God. So prayer's a weird thing. And it's actually really interesting. I feel like I've prayed a lot less since I've left the parish. I don't know why, but I usually pray Luther's bedtime prayer when I go to sleep, and I let that like drift me into a prayerful state as I fall asleep. But even that some nights. So I don't know, Addy. I don't have an answer to prayer, and I think it's so weird and nebulous, right? Like it's not, I could read a devotional, but I don't. I do read the Bible, but what are other practices then for you that feel foundational for your life of faith? I feel like I know part of it being maybe worship, since that's something that you steward for Gather Cincinnati? Would you say, like,
Yeah.
and music, since you're in choir at the church? Are there other like grounding practices in your life?
I do find that my faith tends to be more communal than personal. Don't know if I'm going to make a value judgment on that. It is just what it is. And so the routine of going to church and being in church, and the fact that I can go to any church and that most of the liturgy is going to be familiar to me, most of the songs are going to be familiar to me, brings me a lot of comfort and, grounds me in that way. I think nature is pretty important, and being able to just sit and listen to the birds and marvel at all that has been created is probably the closest thing I have to like a personal spiritual practice.
I'm gonna add one more book to our conversation here. I'm sorry. I'm all because and I think Oord actually introduced me to this author too. But there's a book called Divine Echoes: Reconciling Prayer with Uncontrolling Love of God, and a big piece of it is all about prayer is only as powerful as. I'm gonna butcher this too. See, I should do. I've been out of the congregation too long too. I'm not praying as much either, CC. I hear that very much so. And like, I'm clearly not reading a lot of these books that I used to reference over and over again. But his whole idea is that it's conspiratory. And so like, whenever people, like, the power is in prayer. Like if I said, Addy, I'm praying for you. There's the power in you knowing that you're being prayed for. And like, there's something that happens even on a like, I don't know, quantum metaphysical level, right? Of like just knowing that somebody is in that space praying for you. And like what you were saying earlier too, right? Like it changes me as much as it changes the outcome of what I'm praying regarding or whatever. So Divine Echoes is by Gregory Karris. I think it would also be a really fun thing for you to read. As I'm like pushing things on you. Beyond that, I totally love your idea of nature. And one of the things that I've been really drawn to lately are just trees. Simple, right? Trees in general. I'm wondering if you've had any encounters with the more than human world lately that have really like taken you aback or led you to a space of wonder or awe lately.
My mind always goes to the mountains. I love the mountains. I live in Cincinnati, so there are no mountains. But anytime I do travel, I try to get to the mountains as much as possible. And that is kind of that experience for me, especially when you're kind of like off the beaten path. We always joke when we go to national parks that if you walk 2 miles, that suddenly no one else is there, because no one wants to do more than the down and back, the nature trail, whatever, with some exceptions. But once I'm kind of like out there, mile 5 or 10, and you're just kind of like in the mountains, and the mountains are towering over you, and you feel your like comfortable insignificance, is how I'll say it. Of like, the mountains have the power to make you feel insignificant in a way that is uncomfortable, but it doesn't feel that way. It is like, okay, like my problems are so small compared to these mountains. My troubles are so small compared to these mountains. I am part of something greater in that way. So yeah. If I can get up just a little bit, haven't gotten to the top of too many of them yet. Gotta work on my climbing skills, but if I can just be amongst them.
That's something I think that most people can relate to, whether it's mountains or oceans, right? Like the vastness, the grandeur of some of the natural world. And similar, I have a very holy place, which is infamous amongst ELCA Lutherans who are in the know, which is Holden Village. I'm actually wearing a Holden sweatshirt.
I knew it.
I have my Holden necklace on. I think I'm even wearing a Holden shirt underneath this, which is just so funny. And
this episode brought to you by
Holden Village.
There it is.
I could have been wearing a Holden hat, and I kind of want to order more from their virtual store. Holden right now, unfortunately, is closed because of some devastating flooding that happened in Washington State. They're still kind of navigating wondering of what that's going to look like as they try to repair the road, since it is such a remote place. And I went to Holden with my campus ministry in spring of 2017, and then my then college boyfriend, now husband, and I volunteered there in the summer of 2017, and it was at Holden that I finally said, yes, I'm going to seminary. And then 2 years later, it was at Holden that we said, we are getting engaged. Like, we got engaged at Holden Village. And in 2023, I was on teaching staff and brought my father-in-law with me. Shout out Steve. And we talked about my first call. Like, I was in between interviews, and he was like, what will you do there when you start? And so it was just a time of prayer and reflection. And then in 25 last summer, it was at Holden where I really started feeling like, okay, God is calling me to something else. And then the week after I got back from Holden, Phil called me about this job, right? Like, Holden is this huge place of discernment for me. And yet in March, over coffee with a mutual friend of ours, Claire, who we recorded on the podcast earlier, she said, Cece, where is Holden for you in Texas? Claire like destroyed me at this coffee, like just like sobbing in a coffee shop in New York. And then she's like, let's go to some art galleries. That's Claire in a nutshell. She's literally the best human. Please listen to her podcast. Love you, Claire. But I wonder for you, Addy, like you said that I'm in Cincinnati, there are no mountains, but are there places that get you there? Whether it's a park, a museum, a worship service, right? A song, right? Because I can go back to Holden when we do Holden evening prayer, but I can also go back when we sing certain songs that we've done around like prayer on the cross there. So long wind up, but there's a question in it.
Well, Gather Cincinnati, we are all huge Holden stans. If I say Holden evening prayer, they go, where? I'm going. I don't care what I'm doing that day. I'm going. So that is our stretch goal, is to get to Holden together at some point.
We have to do that. Gather Network takes over Holden Village.
Yes. No, we are huge Holden fans. And actually, my dad did his seminary internship in Eastern Washington. And so he spent some time in seminary at Holden as well. So, like, special place in my heart as well. There's a lot of it in Cincinnati. A lot of it has to do with the communities I've built. And not just Gather, just my friend groups, my climbing friends, my students. There's a lot of moments that I sit back and I see like the people that I've connected in the space that I've created and went, wow, this is holy. And I love that feeling. Absolutely love that feeling. I do think music does that for me a lot. I've actually recently been hired as a church musician, so I'm loving that for me.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I do joke that I have 25 years of experience, being 29, because I've been singing church music since before I could read. So there are very few Lutheran songs that I don't already know. And that brings me a lot of comfort of like, I hear the first notes, oh yeah, and like I have a playlist, just songs that reset my nervous system. And there are quite a few hymns on that playlist. Yeah. I also do really love Athens, which is not quite Cincinnati, but the Southeast Ohio area is just, you get out of city limits, you're just driving, and then like the hills, it's such a gradual change. Cincinnati has hills, but like they're not Appalachian hills. And you're just driving out of Cincinnati and suddenly the hills start getting bigger and the views start getting better. And luckily for me, or unluckily, depending on how you want to look at it, my parents followed me to college. So when I was in college, they bought some land, built a bed and breakfast on it, which is now the continuation of their public ministry. And so now every Christmas, Easter, family get together, I get to go and have this great experience of getting into Athens and being like, what a great place.
There's something about those recurring drives Yesterday, I drove out into the Texas Hill Country to preach at a summer camp, and I grew up going to that camp. Like that's the first place I ever encountered God outside of a sanctuary, was at that camp. That camp changed my life. And I told them that. I said, no pressure, but you're about to have a bunch of campers come, and maybe you'll change their lives like my life was changed here. It's a holy thing. And like I felt it as I was driving out into the Hill Country, a drive I've taken before, but into a very special and sacred place, right? Like, it doesn't have to be just in your city, but it can be a place you go back to, noticing those changes. I think it helps me notice the changes in myself, right? Like, well, the last time I drove out here, I was this, or this was happening, or whatever. So just really, I really resonate with that. And I also wonder, before, I'm sure Phil has a better closing question than I do, like, what are some of your favorite hymns? Because I love hymns. I love music. I'm such a traditional church nerd girl.
Yes. I a lot of times reach for the hymns that are to the Holst settings. So Holst, Mars, and Jupiter are featured in the hymnal quite a bit with different texts. So I really love those two. Any text put it, I love it. Will You Come and Follow Me? We just sang it a couple Sundays ago, and that's such a good one. And it's very nostalgic for me too. We sang it all the time growing up. Elizabeth calls it the test tubes song. It's Earth and All Stars.
Earth and All Stars.
We started doing hymn sings with Gather Cincinnati. And so it's just like, okay, guys, just throw in your favorite hymns. We're gonna sing them. Oh, do you know this one? Oh, do you know this one? Like, let me teach it to you. Very joyful. Highly suggest anybody do it. Do it with your friends if you don't have a Gather. And yes, that one is just like, wait, why are we singing about drums right now? I love this. I could go on and on and on. Gather Cincinnati knows all my favorite hymns because I'm in charge of worship, so I just get to make my friends sing all my favorite hymns.
Before Phil ends with his zinger closing question, I'm really amping you up here, Phil. I hope you add my favorite hymn to your next Gather Cincinnati event, which is When It Seems the Day Will End. It's from All Creation Sings, written by Justin Rimbaud, who taught it to me when I was in high school when he was a young adult. Like, it's a beautiful song. At a retreat. He didn't just teach it to me, at a retreat.
I love that.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure. But I'm actually gonna switch gears a little bit, because I do love so much that Gather is this like city regional representation. So first of all, Addy, thanks so much for your vulnerability and willingness to share that you're wrestling with prayer. And I just love that. I love your willingness to openly engage in that conversation. And, you know, you just put that out to the ether worlds forever, right? That like, that's something that you're struggling and you wrestle with. And that's a bold thing to do. So I really am deeply grateful and appreciative of that vulnerability and willingness to share that. I think I want to end a little bit on Cincinnati. Like, when I think of Cincinnati, I'm a huge St. Louis Cardinals fan, so I think of the Cincinnati Reds, and I like, it boils my blood a little bit. You know, I'm like, ugh, the Reds. But what are the things, if somebody's, whether traveling through and like stopping in Cincinnati, they're like, I'm picking between this city and this city for my next job, and Cincinnati is one of them. Like, what is the thing that you love deeply about Cincinnati? Maybe you're growing to love deeply. And what are some of the things that Gather's really doing to try to help people invest in Cincinnati as a city?
I love this question. There's a lot of surface level answers. You know, easy lowball answers. We have a great mural culture and just a great arts culture in general, but specifically we stand out for our murals. We have a biannual festival called Blink. And in that festival, they employ a bunch of local artists to cover the city in murals. So you can't throw a stone downtown without hitting a mural, and that ekes into the other neighborhoods as well. People will commission murals on the side of their buildings or their convenience store, that kind of thing. So it's a really joyful thing that is like since permeated out to the neighborhoods hither and through. We are a city that has a big sense of place. We talk about that a lot in Gather because we've all come from different places or went to college in different places. And, you know, there are some cities that you're like, you kind of stay in your neighborhood, you stay in your niche. But Cincinnati has like a true downtown that brings everybody in. And I really love that of you can go downtown and you're like, yes, this is Cincinnati, and it is a place for everyone. And we also have those quirky neighborhoods that if you need people that feel like you can go to, the really artsy liberal neighborhood. You can go to the like old architecture kind of like waspy neighborhood. The one I live in right now, from the aforementioned honorary grandparents, if you took it and put it in a cornfield, nothing would change about it. It has very small town vibes, even though I am a 15-minute drive from downtown. So it has pockets of character, but it also has a lot of uniting features that makes you feel like you're truly part of a city. And I think a lot of times that's reflected in our Gather too, is that we've all chosen to live in different pockets of the neighborhood, and we make a conscious effort with our events to do north, south, east, west type stuff. I am one of the furthest north people in Gather, except for some of our Dayton friends have decided to come down to see us sometimes. Shout out to Gather Miami Valley. Love you guys. But then Elizabeth is one of our furthest south. And she actually lives across the river in Kentucky. So for us, yes. Oh, Covington is great. Love Covington. They live in a great neighborhood. So we really are just opposite ends of the city. And Gather has been a great tool for us to explore the entire city together. Of, I'm from this area, you're going to come and do this thing with me. I'm from this area, you're going to come do this thing with me. I want to go explore this thing. Is anybody like interested and available on Saturday? Oh my gosh, yes, I would love to do that. Like having those people to have those experiences with, because doing a new thing by yourself is scary. And so I see it all the time in our group chat of, I want to go to this festival, I want to go to this park, I want to check out this new thing. Does somebody want to do that with me? And more often than not, they do. Hold on, my cat wants to crash the party. Yeah.
Cats are welcome.
Cats are welcome. Well, Addy, thank you so much for your time. I know that this is the summer, which means that you have a little bit more time, and we're just so glad that you were able to spend part of it sharing about yourself and about Gather here on our podcast for the audience that is listening, whether they are young adults seeking space of belonging or they are adults of any age wanting to remember the gifts of the old church, that the early church that are being reclaimed in this present church. And I'm just so grateful for your friendship and your leadership in the Gather Network. It is a gift to be in ministry with you at a completely different site. May we meet one day in person at Holden Village, perhaps.
Finally.
I know. Or next year at the Young Adults Gathering.
Oh, yes, of course. Bare minimum that.
Thanks, Addy. Grateful for you, and blessings to you in the summer.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Collective Voice, the premier podcast of the 787 Collective. For more information, visit us at 787collective.org or find us on social media. And if you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to subscribe, rate us, and share a review. For when you do, you are tricking the algorithm for the common good.